Praise the Lord. Love is in the air. Today is your day. You can't be stopped. But first, our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Salient Oils. My man JC and his wife Larissa, they've got a shop open up downtown in the Kaler. Check them out. Go to salientoils.com. Also, this episode is brought to you by Project Hope with Akong C. This dude's been doing a lot of good in the community, and he's up to more. You should check him out. Go to Project Hope on Facebook. And JC also played a huge role in making this interview happen. So I want to give them some extra love because they deserve it. They're doing so much for our community, and it shouldn't go unnoticed. It's always good to surround yourself with people who are bringing up the community, because that means they're going to be a positive force in your life as well on a personal level, which is exactly what it is. We're always here to bring one another up, and I definitely appreciate it, as well as Ben Asef at Northern Sun Lighting and Sound played a big role in the production of this episode, and so did my man Seth from Fully Controlled, helped produce it. I really, it takes a village to pull any of this off, and to be able to share these moments with my friends while creating is something that I'm lucky enough to be able to say that. There aren't enough people who are living their purpose nowadays, and I'm lucky enough to be able to do it. So when I do it, I try to spread positivity and allow for us all to see the brighter side out of these conversations and what we're talking about. It doesn't go unnoticed. This episode is also brought to you by KATO CBD. Go to katocbd.com. Get your medicine. Use code word astronaut for 10% off. And finally, this episode is brought to you by Rochester Lapidary Jewelers. They can't keep their diamonds on the shelf right now. Business is booming. Why is that? Because they provide you with custom jewelry. You come in with an idea, they will bring it to fruition. Go in there and watch from the waiting area while your jewelry is made, while the bench jeweler wears a GoPro on his head. Check it out. Go to RochesterLapidaryJewelers.com for more information. Plenty more to come. I have so much love for the Sisters of Assisi Heights. They truly made a dream come true, getting to sit down with some of the wise elders on top of the hill. I am so grateful. Enjoy the show. Also, don't forget that Where the Minds Meet 2 is coming up with Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Dennis McKenna, Dr. Joe Taffer. We are going to be talking about all things mental health, spirituality, plant medicine in the 21st century. We are in a renaissance right now, and what that means for humanity is a lot of healing is going to be taking place over the next 5 years. Many people who have come from destructive, broken homes are going to be learning a lot about themselves in regards to their genetic memory, trauma being passed down to the point they go through trauma. We're on the forefront of a lot right now, and we are very lucky to be in the position we're in. So please go to Eventbrite, Where the Minds Meet 2, or Where the Minds Meet. Check out some tickets. Join us on November 1st. I look forward to having you, welcoming you. We've got a lot of surprises. Don't hold yourself back. Join the movement. It's up from here. Enjoy the show.
And I'm gonna be high as a fucking man.
And now, the stationary astronaut.
We are dialed in. Okay.
I grew up idolizing, guess who? I'm going to let y'all guess.
The Beatles.
Nope, she was an interviewer.
Cookie Roberts.
No.
Krista Tippett.
Barbara
Barbara
Walters.
Barbara
Barbara. She was my idol.
Oh, yeah.
And it was her composure
She was good.
and her voice. And she just seemed like that little lady who could get it out of you. Just honesty.
And she did.
She did. And she held some of the most powerful interviews to date. And then you have Oprah.
Yes, Oprah's another one.
Oprah's another one. And beyond her interview skills, she's a mogul too. She's a mogulette. And I think these powerful women who are a voice are very important for society because it's beyond a different perspective. It is a form of respect because women didn't always have a voice. And I think growing up with only women without a dad and seeing losing Princess Diana, and as a young boy, I failed to realize how powerful she was as a figure of change until she passed. And I remember that day. I relived it when Prince died. It was the same feeling. Someone who had made such change, their humility was above par, and we lost them. We lost them soon. And the thing is with Princess Diana, the story gets told after we lose them to the future generations, where she was in Africa feeding kids and helping children all over the planet. And she really lived her change. Where nowadays, I feel like that's being sucked out of society, where it's just cool to give back and then talk about it, instead of just doing it without anyone seeing, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be told to the internet that you just did a good deed. And that's what I feel is going on, where we're losing that, and then the sisters up on the hill have just lived their truth. And I feel it's a story that hasn't been told or talked about. So it was really important to me to come sit down with you all, because I've been working on this for a while. And I feel if anyone has the answer to where spirit has gone and how we can get it back, it is you. So that's why we're here today. Now, what is the essence of life, Monique?
Let's see, as I grow older, I realize that we're here as humans on this earth for a definite amount of time. And that during that time, we really need to leave a mark for what's going to be healthy and good for those that we encounter. And I think I'm also struck by the diversity that we have within our planet here and how much we can do.
How about you, Jennifer? What's the essence of life?
I think it's changed over my 70 plus years from doing what I liked and really enjoying that. And it isn't that I've stopped doing that, but things have been added on to it in terms of personal meaning. I love being in the community. I have found that being in the community for me has helped focus the wonder of God, the search for God, and I am doing that with others. And I suppose in the last few years, a couple of people that I've read who have died and have really given shape to the risk or to the cost of this call. So people in the community have given me books to read. One was the biography of Dan Berrigan, and most recently it's from Dom Helder Camara, who was an archbishop in Brazil. And it's interesting, in both of those lives, they kind of have moments where they have moved from being pretty careful and wanting to keep things the way they knew them to be, and then being pushed to be more engaged with poor people or people that don't have a voice, and the very heavy personal price they paid for that, of being silenced, of being questioned, of going to jail, sleeping on floors, and being very honest about how miserable they were. But all of it, in their poetry and in their writing, it was very much connected to this is what it meant to love God and to love their neighbor. So what I find interesting are, when I read these people now, is to really appreciate how there were really very clear steps. The foundation was the same, but it wasn't understood the same way.
Can God be found in struggle?
Oh, my goodness, yes. I used to think it was really better when it was all going my way. And I still have a kind of big tinge of that. And now it's much more, that's almost too self-satisfying. You need to read the Gospels and Paul's life and people's life differently to see where it happened for them. And it's a different God in the struggle.
It's so interesting because the people that society worships in the 21st century, they are people who, many of them, have gone through that struggle, and they've lived lives we wouldn't envy early on. We wouldn't want that. They had early struggles, so many issues, and then they put in their work because life wasn't getting any better. They put in their 10,000 hours, and then they found something along the way, and it really worked out for them. Oprah being one of them. Life wasn't nice to her early on. Mm-hmm. And look what she made out of it. Mm-hmm. And that's and when they go back and they reflect, these people, even world-renowned producers, and they're older now, and they produced for the Beatles and some of our favorite acts, and they reflect and say, this is life, this still. I've earned this still. I worked so hard with the hustle and bustle, and now it is okay to just be here in the garden. My struggle has paid off. I've made it. And it's so interesting. And that's why I like talking with people who are my elder, because that's where I grab it from, oftentimes, beyond being able to work with younger people and hear what they're going through and hopefully share our story with them so they don't make the same mistakes we did. Marlis, what's the essence of life?
I think as I've grown older, too, I've realized that the essence comes from below. I used to think it came from above. But I think I learned in enough experiences in my work as well as in the relationships that I've had that it's really from the poor, the disenfranchised. They're the ones who can tell the real story. I've never experienced it as such in the same way that they have. I grew up as a rural farm girl and knew kind of what life was, how life was put together. But I think the greatest learning experiences that I have received have come from the indigenous people that I've met, the people who are in struggle, the chaos of the world. And I think more and more that is actually where it's situated. That's where the essence is situated, is where life meets real life. And I think we sometimes tend to push it away or say it's not important or they don't know or they're not educated, they don't have the experience. But it's not true. And I think there's like John Vanier, who is a Canadian who went to live with the persons who were developmentally disabled, and what he learned and how he brought life to other people, that you begin to think of it in your own life. And when he went out to give a speech, he brought one of the developmentally disabled persons with him to open his speech and to give his little vignettes at the very beginning. And, this poor little fella, whoever she or he was, got all this standing ovation, and just new life happened in the persons who heard him, and as well as I think in that individual as well. But I think we tend to look at that resources and gifts are given from above. But I think they're given within people. And the thing is, it's the relationship that makes the difference. And that's where I think our country has to change, because the paradigm disregards the individual right now and in a way puts them aside. Whereas I think the answer is always within ourselves.
Stationary astronaut.
You got it right.
Stationary sisternaut. So if love and happiness is infinite, and our overall goal is oneness, that should mean that making the less fortunate happy should be almost just a given. That should be our goal. If it's infinite, we got plenty to give out. So making the less fortunate, at least giving them a sense of light, I think as a society should almost be Operation A, where because we see these kids in Chicago they're raised with nothing. There is no hope from society's eyes. They're the forgotten. And you see the little things that make them happy. And we live in a world and in a city where we have so much. And with the internet, we can do even more nowadays in regards to conversation and handing out that light, being able to share it. Now, kids are all tapped into Snapchat, Instagram, and they're grasping onto the wrong things. And it doesn't matter what community you live in. Everybody's connected to the internet nowadays. Influence is off kilter right now. The younger generation is grabbing onto the wrong things that aren't getting them anywhere. It's not knowledge-based anymore. It's the look at me society now. What do you have to say, Charlotte, that is missing and lacking in our overprescribed children?
I think it starts with the adults. It's related to the earlier question about the essence of life. And for me, that is spirit and an ongoing transformation. And the transformation is into greater and greater honesty about who I am and who God is, who we are. And that, if it's genuine transformation and honesty, it reaches out. The kids who are lost or seem lost aren't experiencing that hunger for more, for not just hunger for more, but the depth within the adults around them. And that's what they need. That's what, for me anyway, cuts through the selfies, the everything focused on me. So It's really the adults that need the help, I think. It's us.
So in this shallow society, how do we take it deeper with the parents who might not be ready to acknowledge or listen? Is it a wake-up call? Because unfortunately, when we talk about the depths, oftentimes it's some sort of rock bottom that instills the change. And that is exactly why we're bringing the leading behavioral psychologists on the planet here in Gabor Mate. And why we're doing this here today is because I think we all understand it starts with the parents. And when we have shallow parents who are still addicted to selfies because they might be a millennial and have grown up with only knowing the internet, that's a tough hill to climb, because these are people who aren't just raising one child, they might have 2 or 3. And Lord knows that second one didn't get what the first one might have gotten. And it goes down the ladder. And that's, I think, the big question. Does anyone have an answer here in this room of how we can get to the parents?
I think one of the things that's missing is the relationship. I think what all of these devices do is they impersonalize who you're speaking to by Snapchat or whatever method you're using. But the relationship is missing, and the relationship carries the spirit. And the spirit is fed by an inside that needs to hibernate at times and to think about what's happening. But I think when the relationships are cut off, we become isolated, and we become we become like little silos all over the place, talking to each other through our horns, without any heart experience, without any spirit experience with it, without any kind of relational love that is authentic and humble. So I think when those things are missing, then we become like stationary, something or another.
I was thinking that I think children are naturally kind of mystics when they come into this world. And somehow there's a way that needs to be nurtured and filled in, grown on. And I think it's a real challenge for parents today to somehow nurture that. And it's having these children somehow realize that there is a greater spirit that somehow is within each of us and guides us. But we also need parents that can give these children love, which is really the essence of their growth, as much security, even though we're in an insecure world. I mean, that's change happens. But somehow, I think that spirit grows in spite of it all, and trusting that. But I do feel that the children come into this world with a beauty that we don't always understand, and how we find ways to nurture that. And it's kind of going back to that thing about it takes a whole village to help raise a child. So it's not just parents, but it's all of the connections that they have in the family or the neighborhood or whatever.
It's very interesting you called children mystics. Mm-hmm. Because if we all think back to the deja vu every day, the vivid dreams, we still believed in Santa Claus. Life was a mystical experience. There is this compound in our brain, they call it the spirit molecule. It's the same compound, dimethyltryptamine, that gives us our visuals and our dreams, gives us that heavy deja vu. And there was a book written about it called DMT, a Spirit Molecule, by Dr. Rick Strassman. And it was interesting when you're talking about kids being mystics. He was talking about how that compound in our brain is really firing off at a young age. And it's what gives us our heavy deja vu experiences. So it almost makes us telepathic as a child, where they are more aware than we give them credit for. And it's very interesting because we don't take them into consideration, like their point of view or them telling us what we're going to do with our lives. All the while, we should be bringing it back to the kids and grabbing insight from them, because it's very simple. Their approach and their solutions are so simple. I want to be happy, I want to play, and I want to love, in a nutshell. Jennifer. Charlotte, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think the tricky thing in that is, I agree what you said about the children, but we grow up with that message of, I want to be happy, I want pleasure, and it can solidify in us as we grow older to the point where we think, and our culture acts like, I deserve all this good stuff.
Privilege.
And it's not that we don't deserve it, but that we don't, as adults, recognize that, that the hard things of life are a part of that too. We kind of draw a barrier between the good stuff and the hard stuff, and think the hard stuff shouldn't exist, and so we only hold on to the good feelings and the things that give us pleasure. Children do that, but they do it from a whole different context. But if we haven't learned how to integrate the hard things that are also teaching us, that are also a part of normal everyday world, then we get to where we are now culturally, where what I want is what matters. And if it doesn't fit with what you want, too bad. It's what I want that matters. And I think it's a distortion of that early childhood sense of wonder and pleasure. Mm-hmm. It's gotten held onto and grasped and not let go of, so that it doesn't allow for more than that.
You know, Shar, I really agree. I mean, that describes really well how maybe some of what my experience, was. And there's a sense that if, for me, in growing up, if something, I'm the youngest, was wrong, that could be fixed and made better.
And it was your job to fix it.
And it was my job to fix it. And it's really, I mean, that notion about yourself and about life doesn't change just because you've become 20 or 30, those kind of adult markers age-wise. It's a lot of personal work and faith and the need for, models of believers, I think, that tell you really something different. I am amazed at the capacity of people who have only, seemingly, from my point of view, known suffering. And I wonder, what is it that helps them still be such decent, good, real human beings? And I wonder if some of it is they weren't given these platitudes about that life is supposed to be this way. If you're African American, you always know that's what people are going to see. And you learn early on that you have to figure out how to be proud, how to be who you are. But you've got all this outside of you telling you something very different. And I feel at my age, I'm kind of learning that now, of where to situate myself, to really be taught, not so much to lift somebody up, but to really be taught and to be with.
I think kids are so
Anyway.
gifted at being in the moment. They're so able, and I think that's why I simplify it. There was this show called Full House that really taught a lot of us in our households growing up. Every episode at the end, Bob Saget, who was the dad, he would come and he would sit in one of his kids' bedroom right at the end of their bed, and he would be giving a life lesson because of whatever played out in the episode. And going back to parenting and kind of the recalibration, it's moment by moment recalibration by a parent in regards to a child who's always living in the moment. And I'm experiencing this right now with a 16-month-old, where it's the end of the world if she doesn't get her way. But it's the lesson that comes out of that. And that translates into a 20-year-old adult who might not get into the college after their 2-year that they wanted to go to, or whatever that may be. Taking it on the chin and being able to deal with it, I think, is the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that our society is dealing with, where it's my money and I want it now. Instant gratification. And it's a dangerous place to be as a society because there is no still anymore. It's go, 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 go. In hustling and bustling cities. And if we were to tell parents how to slow down, would they take it in stride or would they get offended?
It's kind of tricky sitting here trying to talk about parenting when none of us, the four of us, are not parents.
But oftentimes, though, you see it from a different perspective. Your insight can really calibrate someone who is. There's that old adage, if you aren't a parent, you have nothing to talk about. But the thing is, it doesn't mean you haven't lived a life and you haven't been able to observe parents across the board, some broken, some fixed, some put together, some well off. I still think that insight from women who are spiritually calibrated is very important, because that's what these broken mothers, might be single mothers, might be addicted to drugs, they're lacking that, because spirit can cross-translate through relationship and conversation.
One of the things that's crossing my mind now is when we were sort of forced into it. Because I was thinking about not so long ago, the electricity went off. And, if the electricity goes off in the daytime, you just learn how to work around it. But if it goes off at night, and it's 9 o'clock at night, and there's no availability for TV or for any kind of music or whatever, you're being forced into thinking, what can I do with this time? And I think if we really use it to its fullness, but all the time we're always scrambling to find out something. What can we do? Let's play a game of cards in the candlelight or something. But if we really take that experience, and as adults even, I think it works better with adults than with children, but and just take it in a sense, turn off the lights and go in the dark. And what is it that the dark teaches us? And I think that's kind of a symbolism of society. What are all these chaotic things that are happening in our world right now teaching us? And what is it doing for us? The one thing is, it's bringing us together. And sometimes together for a common cause. And you begin to know then that maybe there's something we can do together. Not all the time, but I keep thinking about how is it that you can. When I was growing up, it was a little bit easier because there weren't all these things to distract you, so to speak. And so you did do things together when the lights went out.
Making the best out of a doozy of a situation. How do you all perceive the silver lining of life? Monique, I saw that smile.
Yeah, the silver lining of life, I think, it's an interesting question. I was going to pick up on your other your other comment too about how we learn from these experiences. If we reflect on them, what are they? They're teachers for us. And it can be a health issue, it can be something else, but it's a teacher for us because we're obligated to learn from that experience. Because I feel that everything happens for a reason. And we may not know the reason for several years or months, but somehow it's something to reflect back on, what did that teach me? Because I think that's where it's not only intellectual knowledge, but it's really life experience that is our real teacher. And I don't know if we can get young people to think about that.
Sister Jennifer, you seem deep in thought.
This book I just finished, and I was thinking a little bit about this morning as I was reading it. This is this Archbishop from Brazil, this Dom Helder Camara. And he was talking about, since he was an archbishop, he was in the hierarchy. But during the council, 50-some years ago now, his interest, his life had brought him to how important it was for the church not just to tolerate the modern world, but it was to really engage it. And the church would be changed by that engagement, by the conversation with people from other faith traditions, people of no faith. And he saw that as not just an obligation, but in all of that was God's voice. And so I think when we're talking about children or parents, part of what's really important is that they know we are really eager to learn from their experience, and that this is a place where they will be heard. Because I'm not sure, more information is what's going to be helpful unless they ask for that. But most institutions are seen that way, as a place of information and maybe of certitude. But anyway, I was very taken with what changed his point of view in the course of his life. We need to know, why is violence so prevalent? What has happened or not happened in people that make this the only response to life now? And to respond to that, and then how do we love, how do we receive, how do we not respond in the same way? Because our inclinations are the same.
I think one thing that is helpful for any of us, all of us, is to step back and look at not just our own community, our own culture, our own piece of the world, but to see the bigger history, and to know that the same thing that happens in us individually happens in our race, in humanity. And there is in each of us an internal spirit that is a drive toward wholeness, a drive toward holiness, a drive toward truth. And that in us may push us into a place of addiction. It may push us into a place of depression, into places that we would, on the surface, look at and say, this is terrible, and it is terrible. But it is the thing that, from inside, that is pushing us to finally wake up. And I think the same thing is happening to humanity as a whole. So on the one hand, we have what Jennifer just named as the violence that we see all around us and the self-centeredness. And at the same time, we look around and we see incredible selflessness, or as you said, people whose lives are full of suffering, and yet their goodness is just shines out. And there has not been, I don't think, planet-wide, as many persons who are meditating, who are looking for something deeper, who are really genuinely searching for and finding, in some places, greater consciousness. So both things are going on at the same time. And I think on this bigger scale just reflects what goes on in us individually. Is on the one hand, we can look at ourselves and see all the ways we've really messed up and be really conscious of how lost we can be. And at the same time, if we look, we see that deeper place that's always alive. It may not get a lot of airtime, depending on our personal life, but it's there. And so for me, it's always that the evolution of humanity is continuing, and it's emerging. And we as a race, as a species, haven't been around that long. So for us to have advanced beyond being totally controlled by our hormones or by instincts is amazing. And I think it's important for us to go back and remember that, because we can be really overwhelmed by what we see on the news and think we are really going to hell. Literally, right here, right now. This is hell. And there's a way in which that's true, but it's not the only truth. It's not the whole truth.
The yin and yang of life, the outside turmoil, it's tough, because my wife and I, we got rid of our cable like 5 years ago. We don't subscribe to the newspaper. Sometimes I'll swipe left on my Apple iPhone and scroll through some of the headlines, but that's about it. I know I'm self-aware enough to know how it affects me. And I think making that decision to get rid of this thing called cable, sorry, Charter, I still buy your internet, was probably one of the most powerful decisions I've ever made for my life and my well-being, and I didn't even do it as such. I did it to save money. I thought I was wasting money. But not soaking in all that darkness from the planet has allowed me as a human being to grab the good out of the planet, if that makes sense. Where I've kind of had this paradigm shift where instead of focusing on what I don't have, focusing on what I do have and how lucky I am. And that has been allowed to butterfly into the perception of how people perceive me and those I associate with. And then obviously that turns into auditing my circle and who I professionally engage with, things like that. Have you ever been forced to make decisions like that? Because that's going to bring us into one of our questions where I do kind of on a macro scale want to know what brought you into sisterhood. And I really think that's interesting because, like Sister Charlotte was talking about, how Right now, we're kind of lacking people seeking spirit. Was there something that, was it growing up in a Christian family and you just knew right away, or was it the role of like how a police officer becomes a police officer? Sometimes they join the military first and then they end up a police officer. Like, what was it? How did you get to this point in your life to become a sister and walk the unbeaten path in a nutshell compared to society? Monique, what was it?
As I was thinking about that as I got the questions this morning. You know, at 21, what do you know? And you make a commitment, as you do in a relationship, in a married relationship, and it evolves. So where I am today is very different than I was at 21. But somehow there was this attraction, if you want to call it that. I remember I was in a retreat. I was going to a women's Catholic college. I had never gone to a Catholic school before. But there was this kind of awareness of these are women who have kind of the same goals, grounded in Christ or grounded in God. And that's what attracted me. And together, as community, that was an attraction, I think, that came later as I experienced it, was how important community is in that whole evolution. So my commitment now has grown deeper as I have grown and evolved. And but there is that wondering, what was it at 21 really that attracted me? And yet it was a spirit somehow moving me toward this and has kind of walked with me during this whole journey. But yeah, it's an interesting question, I think. But I think that my initial commitment was not what it is now.
Sister Jennifer. No, you're a special breed. I can tell. You're deep in thought, always, it seems. You're always there. Some people would be envious of that. What brought you to sisterhood? Was it an early calling? Was it following spirit? Did your guardian angels whisper in your ear?
Well, I do believe in angels. Mm-hmm. I still do. I'm very grateful to have one that has the common good as opposed to my own good as her concern.
So she's a great consultant?
Yeah, she whispers kind things. I grew up in a home that had a lot of books. And from a really, and as you were saying, a very Catholic, but also a very questioning Catholic home. So everything just wasn't taken, which I appreciate now more than what I did when I was living in the midst of it. But I just always loved the lives of the saints, and I read those. And I had this ongoing conversation with these saints whose lives I was reading. And so it just feels to me that I always wanted to be in a community. And I was really fortunate to meet our community. I'd been educated by another religious community in South Bend. And then I came up here and I met our community, and there was such a drastic difference in personality, common sense. I loved the habit. And so I stopped. I entered in my junior year of college, somewhat to the distress of my parents that I didn't finish. But yeah, I have felt very guided and really very fortunate to have found this community, and that it was away from home, that it was away from where I was brought up.
Marvelous.
Well, I decided when I was 6 that I was going to be a sister.
I don't want to be a ballerina. I'm going to be a sister.
And only because I had several aunts who were in different communities. And but when they came to visit us, what happened to me is I grew up in a broader world. My mother would have been happy not to leave the county, and yet at the same time, my imagery was all over the world. And because of their experiences of service, I think I was attracted to what good I could bring to this world. And I think it it remained that way until I needed to decide which one I was going to go to. I decided not to go to anyone that my aunts were part of because I didn't want to be in competition with them. So I chose a different one. And secondly, I also looked for one in which I liked the style of their dress. So that became the deciding factor.
Here we are today.
I agree. Yeah.
I was hoping for that. We got an off-the-cuff answer.
That's right.
But I think the works that my aunts did in a variety of different places around the world, and I think it gave, my father had a wanderlust, and I think it's one of the things that I grew up with, and I think the experiences that I had in the community, since I've been in the community, have even though they've been short-lived, but they have always been with groups that are in the underground, and they are the ones that have influenced me the most in what I've chosen to do, but also in what I feel my gift has been to the world. And I remember being in India and in the poorest section of the whole country of, in the whole city of Mumbai now. The one thing I can say is the people looked happy, and they had nothing, absolutely nothing. And my thing was, what can I bring them? And I soon realized it wasn't what I was bringing them, it's what they were bringing to me. And I think when I came to the community, it's not what I thought I would do at all, and it's not where I thought I would use my gifts, but I think that's where gifts have exploded and have brought new life and new hope to other people. And I think what I saw in these folks in different parts of the world and even in the U.S., where they had a hope. Despite everything that was not good in their life, they had a hope. And to me, it reminded me that hope is kind of like a muscle. You just need to use it. And they did. And I think that's what's given me hope to bring the spirit to other people.
Optimism takes work.
It does.
It really does. It's that paradigm shift in our head. Everything is okay. The darkness means light's coming, no matter what. When God closes a door, he opens a window. We used to have that on our wall.
Did you?
Yes. And I still use it to this day. And whether you are a believer in Christ or not, it doesn't matter. It's a form of optimism. We all owe it to ourselves, and it is a muscle that we need to strengthen. Charlotte, what got you here?
My story is a little different. Closer to Marla's in terms of age.
And you like the dresses too?
For me, God was always present. And I would just be wrapped up in God when I was little. Kind of what you were talking about the spiritual molecule. And that's all I ever wanted. So I don't know, I can't name an age 6. I don't know an age when that wasn't a part of me. And I always assumed that this was the life that would continue that. So the only thing is, I grew up in Rochester, and everybody assumed I was going to be a nun, and I would have given anything to prove them wrong, because everybody assumed it. But all I wanted was God. And so as soon as the day after I was 18, I entered the community.
You're a lifer.
Yeah.
Finding purpose at such a young age is magical. When I hear that, and I deal with so many, including myself, who struggled with purpose for a long time, to hear that, it instills in me and lets me know that we're in the right place at the right time at all times, no matter how it goes. Mm-hmm. And to have that at such a young age is powerful. Because did you find yourself finding your voice early on then too?
No. It only was after I was a hermit for 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
A hermit?
Yeah.
Was there a lot of meditating going on?
Yeah.
A lot of reading?
Yeah.
Did you learn any new recipes?
No.
That's incredible to be a hermit without Netflix. I couldn't even fathom it.
Well, I have
She had a
Netflix now.
computer.
I've had Netflix for a while.
Okay, did you? It's so interesting. Do you sisters think that talking about the transformation of the 21st century religion and belief in spirituality, do you feel that the witches got the short end of the stick?
For sure.
I kind of feel that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where now we, in a nutshell, worship science, where it brings us so much. It helps us along. We have the Mayo Clinic down the street. And alchemists who were in the forest, being one with nature, coming up with potions and brews to help people, and then to be put on trial and burned at the stake. It's like reminiscent of a dude named Jesus who was walking around preaching the word and being a vessel of light, and he got crucified for it. I think of that sometimes, where they might have been taking a different path, but at the same time, I think they wanted to help. And I don't think that's across the board, because it certainly isn't in religion either. Do you feel that the witches got the short end of the stick, Monique?
Well, I think that individually and also society-wise, we will put the blame for whatever's going wrong on an individual or a group. And as I said, I can do that individually too, blame someone else for something that I need to deal with. So I think we need to be careful of what we do with that and who we blame, and instead of trying to work it out somehow, as a country, and war is one way that we deal with it. Our hatred, our disagreements with other people, which doesn't accomplish anything in the end. And and I don't know how we do that. It's as I said, it's something that we need to mature somehow into that and realize that the other person has the same God within them, that God is within me. And when we do that to other people, it's really doing something to God, to that spirit.
I think there's a very primitive part of us that has to that feels like it has to stand against what is different than us. And so we scapegoat whoever. And there's the us and them mentality that kicks in really easily. And we sure see it in our country right now. So whether it was the witches of the past or immigrants and refugees now, it's still that same dynamic. I mean, it has all kinds of colorations around it. But it's just, I think, the same dynamic of needing to, being comfortable with my own tribe and wanting to reject anybody that's not a part of my tribe. And in the case of the witches, there's all kinds of misogyny and patriarchy and all kinds of other things layered over the top of that. But I think underneath it, it's fear of what's different.
I think institutions have come along too, and structures who've wanted to categorize everything. And in a sense, we have divorced ourselves from the fact that everything has the imprint of God on it. And when that imprint is missing, or it's not missing, we have covered it up or put it aside or not acknowledged it. That's when we get into all these different categories that get us into trouble. And instead of realizing that we're all related, whether it's animate or inanimate, whether it's a tree out in the yard or whether it's a bug or something, it all has an imprint of God on it. And when we dislodge ourselves or divorce ourselves from that notion, we kind of forget what's going on.
It's very tough when the winners write the history books.
Yes.
To be able to avoid convolution.
Yep.
And that's something we see. And the truth seekers, like yourself, you sift through it and you cross your fingers. Okay, I found the truth. I'm here. Some find it way early, uber early. Some find it. You were still having snack time when you knew what you were going to do with life. That's incredible. It's powerful. It's so interesting. Now, we go back to, let's say, Christopher Columbus and the darkness that put us here right now. The invasion of South America and Eastern United States, which wasn't even the United States then. It's filled up. That means we're good on that. So knowing that, and then the pilgrims preaching the word and then making their way, and then my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa, James McLaughlin, being the middleman between the natives in South Dakota and the Puritans and the government. It was all that put us right here, right now, that built this castle up on the hill we're sitting in. Do we ever reflect, or do we just move forward while living in the moment? Because that was some darkness that happened, and there are, with minorities, they might end up getting paid because of their ancestors who were slain. Things like that. It's happening with police right now. They're having to do multi-million-dollar payouts because of a wrongful death. That's a war that was brought on by people coming on ships to preach a word. And that's just reality. That's what put us here. Our white skin wasn't necessarily meant to be here. Now, knowing that, is that why we try to do so much good? Why we go to India and we try to help? Why Mother Teresa was doing so much? Princess Diana was doing so much? Are we making up for lost time? What's going on? Because right now there's still darkness going on. There's still war going on. And frankly, it's It stems from my God is better than yours. My God is right. It wasn't known universally back then. And that's just what it is. That's the reality. And I think that's what has pushed so many people away from religion, is they're aware of that. They're aware that their history books weren't necessarily telling them the honest to God truth. It was one-sided. Now people are more tapped in than ever to Native American tradition. They worship the land. They ate every piece of meat off that bone. They made tools out of those bones. Standing Rock, I was up there a couple years ago. We brought food up there. We fed thousands of people tacos, vegetarian tacos. Brought them firewood. And they were fighting the man peacefully, who was blasting them with hoses and rubber bullets and German shepherds. And that's something that was forced on them. It was forced on them by someone bringing something they didn't necessarily want in their life. And it all stemmed from this Bible that was supposed to connect people. It was supposed to bring them truth. The problem was, so much darkness came with that Bible. And that's just the reality of it. I don't know if this Bible that we all relay back to, that has brought so much positivity in so many people's lives, yet so much darkness, is the answer. I don't think Scripture is what it is. All the good that's in there, the stories that we know has so much positivity, there was also so much negativity that came out of that we'll never be able to repair. Disease that wiped out Amazonian tribes, 20 million people. That's why we talk about spirit, because that is universal. Now, what do we do? Do we keep preaching spirit? Do we keep going back to spirit? Because there are people who have had darkness happen, and I keep going back to it, that can't relate to the Bible. They just can't. I would never put that on my partial Native American cousins. I couldn't, because they know what comes with it.
You know, what I hear is you talk about the Bible as a really fixed text. Like, this is what it says, this is what it means, this is what happened. And, you know, that's partly true, but it's really a living text, which means it's still living today. And the work, there's been so much wonderful interpretation that would agree with the very kind of narrow, certain way it was used by missionaries, by Europeans, where the Bible and European culture were just wedded, one and the same. But the work that needs to be done is the study and the living communities of people who know that the God that is revealed in this human-divine relationship was interpreted in a certain way. In the 1800s, 1900s, there are always people who questioned that. And now it's simply a very rich, very fertile, not only field, but it is very nourishing. Unfortunately, we don't get much good preaching. But, it's not only the Bible, it's poetry, it's the arts, it's people that are thinking, that are really engaging with those basic texts that I don't think for me, they can't just be disregarded because of the way they were misused.
And that's the tough part about it is beautiful throughout. Unfortunately, it's been pushed on people. And that is where it brought massacre. And that's to this day, we still see darkness coming out of the church. And it's very tough to not place the Bible as a figurehead or place the entire Catholic religion as a figurehead because of one bad apple. Unfortunately, that's where we came from, was this darkness.
I think,
no matter the beauty in the text.
I think what we've missed somehow is the real message of Christ, in the Scripture. So that's the part that needs to be evolved. So he had a message, Christ did, about how we should live and how we respond to other people, and his outreach to people who were poor, not the wealthy. So I think that somehow we have missed the message in many ways. And I think that it's a message that needs to grow in each one of us to hear that.
What would you say to a European crusader who had a cross around his neck, but he was coming to in a nutshell, take land?
Go home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that's the evolving.
Yep.
That's the evolving of the church, I think, to find, what their real purpose is. And it's been a real struggle. And I think mainstream religions many times have not been able to offer people what they needed for their spirituality to grow. And so now we have a large segment of people that are nuns, N-O-N-E-S, who don't belong to any church, but they still are looking for where this spirit is within them and how to nurture that.
I think the thing that's gotten into the way, in the way, is the structure of how it was interpreted. The structure interpreted in a very, I don't know how I want to say that, the structure characterized it in a way that said this is the only way, which is where the mistake was. And as a result, I think what Monique is talking about is that people are letting the structure itself fall by the wayside at this point in time. But I think what's growing is the important thing, and that is, why is it that mindfulness is so much a part of our structure today, whether it's in business or it's in finance or it's in schools? It's the thing that's being used to bring leadership, to bring students as young as in 6 years old, in first grade, to a time where they back off from whatever is going on in their life, just to have some silence and some quiet, and to look in the inside. And I think, the silence is the first language of God. And so hopefully people are coming forward in this mindfulness and matching it with Christian mystical thinking to bring about a kind of contemplation and meditation that will bring that spirit forward in business, in medical societies, in schools, in whatever, so that we arrive at something new.
I think the hard thing is that religions grow up around the essential experience of the founders or the founding community, and become the way that original experience gets handed on so that generations after can have the same experience. But over time, the structure of the religion becomes solidified, and the ones in charge lose touch with the experience. And the structure is what becomes important, and the rules and regulations, all of that. And so we have what we have today, where the mainline Christian traditions, churches, are pretty much people are walking away from because they've lost that essential connection and so people feel like they can't find the experience within those traditions. And the hard thing is that there is something that the traditions do have to offer: a history, an understanding, a depth of wisdom that succeeding generations need. And that's been getting thrown out as well as the people rightfully throwing out rules and regulations that have nothing to do with their lives and in fact are abusive of other people's. So I think we're at a place where we need to rediscover, re-energize the original experience and connect it with the wisdom of the tradition and let go of the unnecessary structures. And that's a really messy place to be.
I was going to ask, how do sisters deal with the superiority complex? Like, is it out of sight, out of mind? Is it letting your voice be heard? How do you deal with it?
What do you mean by superiority complex?
Well, we were talking about churches changing, and we see it in business too, where it's a lot of ego. It's a lot of I'm in power and you're below me, which I've seen people run away from, and I've certainly run away from it too. But how is it, because we're shifting away from masculine energy, we're going into the age of Aquarius. And this feminine energy, and I think so many people, males are finally being able to talk about their emotions, and we're not we don't have this put on our shoulders to be hard and not be heard. How do we deal with the superiority complex across the board? Doesn't even need to be in the church. Where'd your microphone go, Jennifer? I know you got something to say.
Well, one difficulty, I'm not sure I don't know what I'd call it. I don't know if I'd call it a superiority complex, except I think African Americans could say that to white people, and we would have very little idea of what they're talking about, but we know it's true from their experience.
Like you were saying.
I guess every night I ask for forgiveness in kind of a general way. I'm not always sure. It's not because of this maybe one thing I did or did not do. But I just know that some of all the access, the privilege, having friends, health care, I do ask for forgiveness for that, partly because I know it's just what everybody, and I have it. So for me, it's and that is so strong, actually, in the Bible and all religious traditions. That's why I know what you're saying is a point of view about the Bible and all that. It does give me chills, though, to have it dismissed.
The matter is, we have this spirit within us, and we've sort of given it away by objectifying everything outside of ourselves and destroying relationship. And so if we could get back to being attentive and intentional about doing the dishes or doing whatever. I think we've gone one step toward it. And I think the other thing is, I'm so aware in our society right now of how many people are really knowing that they can back up and are indeed doing it. They're calling it mindfulness right now. But I think that's one of the steps that we have that brings us to a ground zero level so that we can begin to grow up from there. I think we on the Hill necessarily have the only answer there is.
No.
So I think
Not at
every
all.
answer is within all of us sitting around this circle, everybody in Rochester, every dog in town, every piece of creation has this piece. And one of the things we need to do is to acknowledge it and to find its reality in ourselves. I didn't mean to take it away from you, but
It's so true because, Mayo Clinic, for instance, and the Sisters, you've done all you can.
right?
You've created the Spirit Center at, was the Gonda subway level. It's there for everybody. It's open to the public at all times.
This is also a part of it.
Can you explain that?
Well, I think, as you said before, when you bump down to the lowest and you know that you can only go up, and though I don't think everybody in the city are in the doldrums of that dump, but I think people are beginning to realize that going up the ladder isn't necessarily where they want to go or should go, but maybe it's going down.
I think transformation is not going to happen overnight. And we know that from history. So we are in a kind of a peculiar situation, so to speak. But I think that somehow we're working towards something here. There's something that's going to evolve that will be positive and that will move people beyond where they are. And we're not the center of that. We don't have all the answers. None of us do. And so it's all of us together that need to work at this. And I'm running out of steam.
Right, I am too.
Yeah, me too. And and we'll leave it at that. And it's a lot of this is going to be just what all yours rebuttals, because it's beyond my blabbermouth. It's you bringing it back to square one every single time, and I think that's so powerful. So much knowledge has been shared, and at the end of the day, Nick, I don't have the answers. You want the answers. I don't have them. I focus on myself.
You'd like them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. This is awesome.
Shaka hooka 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 shaka hooka hooka